Well, I finally got around to watching the Dark Side of the Ring, Chris Benoit, part one and two. I'd seen a bunch of people do reviews on it, and they were all kind of like emotional in theirs. And I thought to myself, that's going to be rough to watch. And I thought, given I want to take my mind off the pandemic situation, so I'll watch this. Not the best idea. This was just, oh man, conflicting. That's a great word I'd use. Just the whole Benoit thing, his life as a whole, just because as a pro wrestler, he was one of the best ever as far as like in the ring, how much he put into his work. He was obsessive. He was like, and they showed that in the documentary. Like the way they filmed the documentary, like the interviews with Chris Jericho, Dean Malenko, Vicky Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero. They had some other people in there, like Nancy Benoit's sister. Just all these people that incorporated in this documentary, and it connected with you so well, especially in that part one. It was, you just felt the emotion from it. You really did. And then that built up. Then you hit part two, where they go into the details of the double murder suicide. It's just horrible. It was graphic. It was because you can picture just Chris Benoit when his brain was just gone. What was he? The mind of like an 88-year-old, he had a brain of an 80-year-old from all the damage and the diving headbutts and the chair shots and all this over the years, and everything that's added up in his brain, and that led to the Chris Benoit who did what he did, and it's just how his legacy's looked back upon. Like this is not gonna be like a full documentary review. This is just my thoughts after watching it. I'm not gonna go through who said this and what who did what. It's just the whole thing brilliantly made. It's probably the most emotional I've been watching a documentary in God knows. It's just the way they build it up throughout. Like part one is talking about Benoit, everything he went through to get it, break into pro wrestling, and all really showcasing how tirelessly this guy works, and everything he goes through, his personal struggles, and all of that. And then they begin part two by talking about the tribute show and how that was misleading, and how at the time JR said this himself. Jim Ross is brilliant in this documentary, by the way. But JR was talking about how they expressed all the information to the viewers that they knew. Like at the time of the tribute show, they didn't know what Benoit had done on the Saturday and the Sunday of the weekend before. They just knew that he'd passed away and they had to do a tribute show because he's Chris Benoit and he'd given so much to the business. Main event of WrestleMania 20, all the emotion that came with that, how that was part one, talking about his road to WrestleMania 20 mainly, and everything he meant for everyone, really building up, and then they go into what happened, and it's just to think that someone would do that, and it's bigger than pro wrestling, of course. It's bigger than everything. It's just having a family and seeing that happen, and it taints his legacy and how he's remembered, and as so it should. Something like that is just, it was incredibly scarring for the wrestling business. That day that weekend in 2007, that happened. Ever since, pro wrestling's reputation hasn't really recovered much. That was just so damning, and to see the business go through that, and Benoit do that. I'm not going to go into the deep. If you want to watch the documentary and you haven't seen it yet, be warned. It's a tough one as far as emotions, especially when the guy who wrote the book about Benoit, when he's describing the ins and outs of what Benoit did on the Saturday and the Sunday where the horrific tragedy happened, I was just floored by that. I didn't know the exact details. I knew roughly what had happened, but the way they describe it, the way they shoot the documentary, showing where these things happened, and he's recalling what's happening, and you're picturing this happen. It was genuinely scarring. It was just it was horrible, and to think that Nancy and the son, the kid and all that, had to go through that, and then Chris did what he did, the lat pull down machine, just horrible. And then coming out of that, you really saw in the documentary all the emotion of the guys who were so close to him. Jericho especially. That one, Jericho struck me when he was like, Jericho was crying about it. It was just, they made this documentary so well. It was just, yeah. I don't know how much more I'll say about this video. Just, I guess I'll talk about the Benoit legacy a bit, but just on the whole, this documentary, if you haven't seen it, I mean, be warned. If you go out and watch it, you're probably gonna get emotional. It's gonna hit you. It's gonna hit close to home. Watching Benoit and his everything he went through, and then for him to do what he did, and it's just, I don't know, like Benoit himself. As far as the Hall of Fame, that's the other thing with Chris Benoit. A lot of people say that he should be in the WWE Hall of Fame because Jimmy Snooker is and all of that. And honestly, I've just finished watching that documentary, and my thoughts at the end of that is the same as it was before the documentary. Benoit should be nowhere near the Hall of Fame, and it's not because of him as a pro wrestler. Steve Austin said it himself. It was something along the lines of, "It's bigger than pro wrestling." It's not so simple as just pro wrestling's all it is, because I know it's the World Wrestling Entertainment Hall of Fame, but because of what happened, he can't go in. And yeah, I know Jimmy Snuka's a murderer as well, and he's in there. But at the time, like that was in the 80s, and it was pretty much like kept on the hush. So the Snuka going into the Hall of Fame, and it was all fine and dandy at the time in the mainstream. And then it kind of got out what happened with Snuka, and then it's been more controversial since. But this was well and truly in the public light. Like, too many people knew about this. It was all over the mainstream. Everyone knew that Chris Benoit, the pro wrestler, the WWE superstar, he killed himself, he killed his wife, he killed this person. Awful. And like, especially just, I don't really want to mention this, but I feel I'm just going to anyway. Like when back to the guy talking about the details of it, the stuff with the Bible, it's just like, it sends chills down my spine. It's just horrible. How Benoit was like, googling, like statistically googling like Bible, like tellings and stories, and this one story of resurrecting the son. You hate to see that. I don't know. So yeah, that's the video. Pretty much just an incredibly emotional Chris Benoit documentary. Incredibly well made. I haven't watched one of these Dark Side of the Ring things before. I don't really watch many pro wrestling documentaries. Like, I watched the World Wrestling Entertainment home video ones, like CM Punk Best in the World, Triple H, like Kingdom Come. That's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so. Those kind of ones back like a few years ago. The Rock, his one. But this was completely different. This was raw. This was pure emotion. Pure emotion went into this. From the stories of the guys that they interviewed, Jericho and JR struck me most because they're the ones I'm most emotionally connected to. But the Guerreros who are in this, just because Jericho especially, no matter how the Eddie thing was hard enough, because Jericho's close friends with Eddie and Chris Benoit, and then he lost Eddie, and then this Benoit thing happened, and Jericho was just he was like he didn't know how to react. He was numb, and it's like just watching it, you felt numb for these people, and at the time, what Benoit did, you feel numb for that. So, and that's the video. Hopefully, you enjoyed. It's just like the whole thing with Chris Benoit. He can't go into the Hall of Fame. I'm sorry, he just can't. You just can't. I'm sorry, but yeah, hopefully enjoyed. See ya.